Hey, sir, we are now recording. Welcome back, everybody. This is another installment of our interview series titled Leaders in the Force. Today's a special day. We have the opportunity to chat with Captain Hale, Captain Chad Hale. He is currently assigned to the Gainesville Medical Recruiting Company or detachment, but he is I apologize, he is a Medical Service Corps officer. So today we're going to be talking about the medical service branch, and it's a new addition to the Leaders in the Force series because for the last 12 episodes, we've been talking about combat arms. But again, the purpose of Leaders in the Force is not narrowly targeted. It's just to complement cadets branch education holistically. So we're going to have more conversations with gentlemen and ladies like Captain Hale from other branches. So, sir, thank you for agreeing to contribute to cadets education. This isn't only for my cadets at FAMU. This is for anybody who tunes into Leaders in the Force to learn from officers like you. I'd like to cede the floor for any opening remarks.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for this opportunity to speak, as well as offer some guidance and insight as to what serving in the military entails. Medical Service Corps is definitely unique in the jobs that we do, and there's a wide array of opportunities as far as forward career progression that you don't get indoctrinated into and have a good understanding of what your career path might look like while you're serving as a cadet or you're going through any sort of commissioning program. So I wish, as when I was going through ROTC, there would have been this type of opportunity available to myself to kind of reach out early before even leaving for training and being designated into the branch of medical service that I could have spoke with and learned from. So this is a great initiative, and just thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'd like to start the conversation by talking about what Medical Service Corps is not. That's the way that I first understood it when I was in school, because a lot of people said, oh, I want to be an Army doctor. Well, the Medical Service Corps is not the medical corps. So providers like veterinarians or doctors, they belong to a separate part of medical command. And sir, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Medical Service Corps has more healthcare administrators, and you can speak to the different the different specialties within. But that helped me understand it at first. It's like the administration side of healthcare. So, sir, what other domains within Medical Service Corps are there?
Well, there's a wide array of opportunity within the medical service community, but you hit the nail straight on the head with saying that we're not doctors and we're not clinicians in any facet, nor do we advertise ourselves as such or carry ourselves as such. From an operational standpoint, the medical service officer is going to serve in the capacity of planning security operations, management, direct leadership, developing medical plans, op orders, con ops, and helping the medical readiness of the force from an operational capacity. When you look at the clinical side, that's when an individual such as myself gets an opportunity as their career progresses, and you knock out key leadership roles and opportunities, your platoon leader time, your XO time, your company command time, things that you need to develop yourself as a leader at early stages in your career. After you complete those, then you will be provided the opportunity to go into areas of specialization. And once again, you were correct using the example of a healthcare administrator. That's one of 7 capacities that a medical service officer can transition into. Along with that, which that's a 70 Alpha. You can be, you start out first and foremost as a 70 Bravo, which is a health services officer, and that's where you're taking those key developmental positions. Once you become the rank of captain and you're usually post command time, that's when you can start looking at going into an area of concentration in AOC or your specialization, which will be your long-term career progression track. Healthcare administrator, 70 Alpha. You have 70 Echo, patient administration. You have 70 Delta, which is IMD network management, which is computers. and network solving problem types of things within the medical community. 70 Foxtrot, which is myself, a human resource manager. 70 Kilo, medical logistics. Hotel, which is planning, security, operations. And 70 Charlie, which is a comptroller, which manages, like, is a treasurer. So you typically don't get into those roles and those capacities till you're much later in your career. Because like I said, you have to knock out those early developmental positions that all officers, regardless of branch, are expected to go through. But to summarize what your statement was, we are the supporting element of everything medical. We're not clinical, we're not hands-on patient care, but we're providing the resources and the support to the medical community that will allow the clinicians and nurses and doctors to do their job and practice medicine. We're the supporting element and planning piece around all of it, whether it be in a field environment or in a brick and mortar hospital type of setting.
Okay, that does illuminate a lot. So if the providers, nurses are the operations, then medical service officers do everything from personnel support to logistics, just like we have on the tactical side. Okay, that does help. And then if I understood correctly, every medical service officer commissioning in as a second lieutenant is a 70 Bravo health service officer, which is general. And then after captain's career course, they have the opportunity to specialize in one of the other 7 AOC, areas of concentration AOCs.
That's correct, yes.
All right, sir. And then also reiterate or doubling down on that first introduction, as a lieutenant, a lieutenant in medical services looking at a more tactical planning role, which is the only role that I'm really familiar with. I come from an infantry background. I was a platoon leader in an infantry battalion, and the only medical service officer that I interacted with was the battalion medical officer, Meadow. That Meadow was a second lieutenant that came from medical service, MS Bullock in Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. And they were the medical officer, which was part of the staff, the battalion staff. And they were also the platoon leader for the medical platoon. So, sir, can you please talk about that position? Because in a prior conversation, you told me that you also held that role of medical platoon leader. Can you please illustrate to our listeners what that position entails?
Absolutely, absolutely. So typically the way that it works is if you're serving as the battalion medical officer within an infantry battalion or a combat arms footprint, as you know, in a combat brigade, there's usually anywhere between 5 to 6 battalions within that brigade. Each battalion should have one medical officer working in the same capacity, whether it be a field artillery, light infantry, headquarters, CAV unit, whatever the case may be, whatever the components are making up that combat brigade, there should be a representative from the medical community within that footprint, such as the Meadow that you spoke of in your time as a platoon leader. I did serve in that role. I spent almost 2 years, started off as a second lieutenant. The funny part is a lot of people don't know, but the platoon leader slot on the TDA in an infantry battalion is actually held by the PA or the main physician assigned to that battalion. But because they have no operational experience and their primary job, or sole job, is tracking the readiness and healthcare of the organization, they don't have time to fill that role or that capacity. So it gets defaulted to the health services officer, which truly that's what we're meant to do anyway. So yeah, I don't know why the organizationals are set up that way. It's just my own professional and personal opinion, but the platoon leader slot should be slotted as a health service officer and not the PA, but it's a captain's role. And that's usually from my only guesstimation as to why that would happen, because most Meadows come into those roles as a second lieutenant, as you had mentioned. what you're going to do is like you said, you're going to serve as the platoon leader, managing all the medics, making sure that they're staying up to speed on their BLS certifications. They're doing their Table 8 training. You're implementing the critical care course, lifesavers course within that footprint, making sure everybody is certified in combat lifesaving, managing the readiness of the force for the medical platoon. You're managing the aid station and the clinic and all the Class 8 medical supplies that are needed to run the day-to-day sick call operations for that unit. And you're in charge and responsible for everything medical within that footprint, as well as serving as special staff to the battalion commander in XO, to where you're doing all the medical planning and you are the subject matter expert of everything medical. So for instance, if there's a field problem coming up and the battalion commander needs a medical plan devised to assess the readiness and risk that he or she is able to take within that given operation, they would ask that a medical plan is drawn up and briefed to the effectiveness of whether or not it's a realistic risk that the commander should take based off of the level of care and support that can be provided to their troops during that operation. You're also serving a key piece during the medical sustainment piece of a long, drawn out operation, such as a deployment as well. So there's a lot that you're responsible for, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of things going on. The big thing, you're tracking 100% readiness of the force, making sure that everybody's med pros and medical readiness is updated. They're going to their annual PHAs, going to their annual dental visits, and you're usually scheduling those off in blocks for each company within the battalion. So therefore, you're not trying to do onesies and twosies, so you will be coordinating with the healthcare providers directly in the clinic's provider, so you can bring everybody through en masse to get that done. You're also working directly with the SRP site for upcoming deployments, mobilizations, to make sure that everybody is vetted on the roster and has achieved all the readiness standards that they need in order to deploy. On top of all of that, you're also responsible for tracking the med boards and the MEBs, medical evaluation boards, for those who are on profile and potentially going to be separated. All in all, the standard, obviously, in a perfect world would be 100% medically ready of any force at any given time. But in order to be able to deploy and considered combat ready, you got to be well over 95% in order to be ready to mobilize. So it's a huge responsibility for the medical officer to ensure that all of those facets and all of those details are managed very well. And most importantly, you have to have a very, very strong working relationship with the medical platoon sergeant, because if you don't, you're going to fail. So you have to be able to have very good, strong interpersonal skills and be able to build those relationships, because they're the ones that's going to be working directly with the first sergeants and the platoon sergeants within the footprint and the other companies, to ensure that everybody's got a good line of communication and everybody's doing everything that they need to do. So.
Thank you, sir. I want to add to that with my interactions with, or how I saw the Meadow employed back in Germany in First Squadron 2CR. We were planning a battalion training exercise offsite away from our home station in Germany in France. So it was the first time that an American unit was liaising with this French training area with the French Army. So we were kind of like, not reinventing the wheel, but breaking ice in a certain way in terms of there weren't a lot of systems in place for us. So the battalion commander and the XO looked at the medical officer, still a second lieutenant, to say, hey, if worst case scenario, something happens on the range, it was a live fire training exercise, and we have an injury, time distance analysis, where do we need to pre-position our evacuation assets to save this soldier's life? And I just want to highlight that because this is what we're talking about, the gravity of and the urgency of the role of the Meadow as a planner is we need to talk about where do we pre-position assets, what sort of coverage do we need to have in order to save a soldier's life in case the worst happens. And that's not something that's might be advertised right off the bat. And it's an extremely critical piece, a lot of responsibility given to a very junior officer. I would say, staff primaries in a battalion are captains with 4 or 5 years of experience already. And to a certain degree, the Meadow is operating shoulder to shoulder with 6 years or 4 years less experience. So, sir, I don't know what you want to add to that.
No, I mean, once again, you're very astute in your assessment of your experience working with your battalion medical officer, and that's very correct. A lot of times it's sink or swim, baptism by fire, so to speak. Either come in running, hit the ground running, and have a very strong idea of what's needed of you, or you have enough sense about yourself to find the right mentorship that you're going to need in order to build a plan in support of the commander's objectives. And you have to hustle. You're always on the go. You have to be willing to open to criticism, thick skin, accept help from people, be able to reach out. And your plan is only going to be as successful as the partnerships that you're building with the other supporting elements within the battalion, whether it be the S4, the supply officer, because they're going to ensure that you're getting your medical supplies and logistics in a timely manner, the signal officer, the S6, to make sure that you're going to have the right comms and network communications and availability. So if you have to do a lifeline out or a 9-line, you have those capabilities. Everybody is essential. The MI officer, making sure that you're talking to them on a regular basis and understanding what the threat level is within the footprint that you're operating in. It's a complete team effort. So also on top of what you're saying, you have to be able to build strong relationships and have very good interpersonal skills to be able to talk to these other people and understand what it is that they're bringing to the table, so you can paint a realistic and efficient medical and successful medical plan for your team and your command. Because if you don't, you're going to fail miserably. So yeah, it's pretty intense, and like I said, a lot of people don't make it. It's huge responsibility for a second lieutenant straight out of the basic officer leadership course. And the best piece of advice I can offer anybody if they're very young and new to the Army is that seek mentorship, seek guidance, go up to the BSB, the Brigade Support Battalions, find the most senior medical service officers within those footprints in the Charlie Med, and start picking their brain, because more than likely they may or may not have served in that capacity. So definitely be open to get mentorship and seek it out. That's the one, or the largest obvious disadvantage an individual has serving in that particular role, because as you stated, you're the only medical service officer in the battalion. So out of 800 to 1,000 soldiers, you're the only one in the medical corps, medical specialty. So you have to be willing to look outside of the battalion and the organization for that help and that guidance.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I've interacted within the FAMU program with a lot of cadets that branched and want to branch medical service into medical service because they have aspirations of transitioning later on into a provider role, whether that's physical therapist, whether that's physician's assistant. And yes, there are windows later on, as we've spoken about before, and I'll ask about that in a bit, windows to transfer into a provider role, whether that be through special pipeline programs or I mean, you'll expound on it. But one thing I want to emphasize before we do have that conversation is how a medical service officer, especially serving in the Meadow role, needs to be intimately aware with the operations planning process. I'm talking troop leading procedures, op boards, military decision-making process, because they will be on that battalion staff or that brigade staff helping plan the medical support side of operations. So to translate that to cadet terms, cadets going to advanced camp are going to be evaluated on their ability to receive the mission, issue a warning order and operations order, and then accomplish a tactical task. That is absolutely something you need to be proficient at as a medical service officer, because I think there's a lot of danger, and I hear it, and I shouldn't, of cadets saying, "Oh, I'm going to branch AG or med service, and this technical stuff that we're learning is for the infantry guys," and that's absolutely not true. And I just want to highlight it and have you comment on it as to why a Meadow needs to be well versed in land nav and operations planning, because that's. I'll cede the floor to you.
No, I got you. Well, you're absolutely right. You have to have the basic leadership skills and operational understanding to be successful as a newly commissioned officer, regardless of what branch you're serving in, because you're going to be put in key leadership developmental positions that are going to require you to have those skill sets. Now, at the level and to the amount of detail that you're going to be expected to execute those, it will be largely determined based off of the type of unit that you start your career off in. You start off as a battalion medical officer within a combat arms unit, 100% you need to know all those things. You have to know exactly what it is for two reasons. One, whether you believe it or not, you're in the infantry. You may be a medical service officer, but for that time frame that you're serving in that unit, you're an infantry officer, and you're expected to know and understand everything that it is that those guys are potentially doing, so you can better serve them from a medical standpoint. You're also twofold responsible for the combat medics assigned to the line units and the infantry guys who are going out. So if you can't train them and doctor and mentor them and guide them on the do's and don'ts and TLPs and SOPs and everything that they need to do to be proficient in their job set, then once again, you're failing them as a leader and as a mentor, and therefore it could cause serious problems within the organization and leading to unfortunate deaths of soldiers because you didn't take your job serious to learn those things. Any organization that you work for in the Army is going to have objectives, mission objectives, battle rhythms, training requirements, you name it. And it's your job as an officer within that organization to fully understand exactly what's expected out of everybody within that unit, because otherwise you're not going to be able to plan accordingly if you don't have those skill sets. There will come a point in time, depending on which career path you decide to transition into from your area of specialization, which once again is well past your captain time, captain's career course, company command time, and you're looking at anywhere between your 5th, 7th, 8th year of commissioned service. So you've knocked out all those key leadership positions that you need to fulfill in order to continue to progress, that all of those skill sets that you're mentioning are very, very important, very important. And the biggest ones that are not actually discussed, that you're learning as you're going through your sticks lanes and you're going through your squad tactics and your evaluations, is your communication skills. That's really what's helping you hone and try to learn, figure out what your leadership style is going to be. Are you going to be someone who freaks out under pressure and just starts yelling at people? Or are you going to be someone who's calm, cool, and collect, and you know how to talk to people with a calm head, and you're respectful, and you get more of a rapport and more support out of your people because you're talking to them in a manner that they feel is respectful. That's what those tactics are going to teach you, and they're going to serve you over the course of your entire career. You may not necessarily be packing your rucksack and going on ruck marches and sleeping in the cold on the ground and planning an ambush on somebody, but the skill sets and the personal skills that are required in order to operate in any environment are just the same and extremely important. So, and if you fail miserably as a second lieutenant and a platoon leader, whether you're in a a Charlie Med and a BSB, Brigade Support Battalion, or a medical maintenance brigade, support brigade, or in an infantry battalion, you're not going to progress because you can't demonstrate those basic skills that are being expected out of you just to commission as an officer.
Yes, sir. I mean, there's a reason why these skills, these gated events, whether that be land nav, basic rifle marksmanship, operations planning, are part of the basic accessions curriculum. Every officer needs to have those baselines. And again, I keep drawing to this experience in France because unfortunately it showed us some of the drawbacks in the competencies of our medical platoon. But we were operating in a battalion sized fight with platoons in their AOs, and we had the medical platoon in an evacuation function, right? So different medical evacuation vehicles. And if the 68 Whiskeys, the medics, cannot get to the AXP to transfer that casualty, then, you know, it doesn't matter how good they are at saving a life because they couldn't land nav their way to get there. So that's how important these basic skills are. I just want to drive that home to our listeners. You know, all the stuff that you're learning in ROTC does not apply to one branch. It applies to every branch.
Another example in support of what you're saying is when one of my deployments, I had to run the battalion medical station in the footprint that we were operating in Afghanistan. And within a month of being in theater, we had to have our capabilities tested to the point to see, because of clearance routes that were being operated on, high levels of threat or risk, we had to look at other avenues in order to get our logistics and our supplies to our FOBs and our people so we could sustain operations. And one of the things, whenever you do that, you have to have medical support, you have to have direct operational support in anything that you're doing, whether it's a convoy bringing supplies or taking people, personnel back to headquarters for administrative reasons or whatever the case may be. You have to always have that operational element there for protection, force protection. And one example being is I had to develop plans on almost a weekly basis of what they call ring routes for the aviation units to see what their capabilities were. And each route that the command team was looking at potentially taking in order to achieve their goals, I would have to draw up a plan and say whether or not it was feasible or not for supporting aviation units to operate and be able to provide coverage for the rest of the units operating within our region of theater while simultaneously providing direct care in order to get in the event of a catastrophe or a mass cow or a high risk type of scenario, we could get soldiers back in a timely manner in order to save their life. So, and that's not something that I was ever taught in basic officer leadership course. That wasn't something I was taught in ROTC. That was something that is doctrine, and from an operational standpoint, from a medical platoon leader, that you instinctively just should know and understand how to do. But I had to geographically understand the entire layout of the region of Afghanistan that we were operating in and be able to understand whether or not there was places to put LZs, what the flight time was going to be, what that translated to in nautical miles compared to like miles per hour in a car. So yeah, I mean, it's extremely important because if I would have been off or didn't care and would have just, made stuff up, it could have potentially been a catastrophe and cost, a lot of people their lives, I mean, Lord forbid, there was an IED or, some sort of direct contact with the enemy, which we were fortunate to where while I was there, none of that happened, but you have to always have that in the back of your mind, planning for worst case scenario, best possible outcome. So.
Yes, sir. Thank you. In the tactical setting, that medical officer is planning evacuations for that formation. So route planning, operations planning, time distance analysis, that's got to be your bread and butter because we're talking about saving a soldier's life in an evacuation. Okay, sir. So thank you for that. What do you call that? Caveat. Now I want to transition to speaking about the opportunities for those, again, those cadets that I mentioned that are interested in medical service and are interested in the windows opportunities that it opens up, not only to transfer over to a more to a provider role, but within medical service, if they do stay medical service, 70 series, those different AOC. So we've talked about what their life could be like as a medical service officer, lieutenant, and commander, but then what happens after? So what are you looking to do as a HR manager? What are other opportunities down the line?
Well, my forte, like I said, I put in my request to the HRC, Human Resource Command, this last fiscal year, to requesting early designation for the 70 Foxtrot Human Resource Manager identifier. A board voted on it. They meet once a year and they look at the requests, and then they vote. A panel votes on it. I was fortunate enough to be selected as a 70 Foxtrot, which is a huge honor. I'm post command. I served 2 years as a company commander in Hawaii, and then coming here to USAREC as a healthcare medical recruiter is considered a broadening assignment. So I was on orders to come here to do medical recruiting while I was waiting to find out whether or not the designation was going to be accepted, giving me the specialization human resources. From here on out, what I need to do is I'm also simultaneously in my window to go back to school for long-term career progression, what they call long-term healthcare education and training, or LTAT is what it's called. So as a medical service officer, I'm afforded the opportunity to apply for a number of programs this fiscal year. There were 8 different opportunities that I could have applied for that were unique to the 70 Foxtrot Human Resource community. That designation, that panel does not vote, and the results will not come out until this upcoming summer. But for the sake of teaching and mentoring, first choice was to go back to school to get a master's degree at school of choice in human resource management. Like I said, I won't know until this upcoming summer whether or not I've been selected for it. My second choice was to serve in an internship within a major medical center at Fort Sam Houston for the Army in the capacity of a human resource manager, to where I would shadow and do a lot of group and project type work under the guidance and mentorship of the human resource manager, chief of human resources within the hospital there in San Antonio, Brooke Army Medical Center, which is also a phenomenal opportunity. I would be happy with either one, to be honest with you, but my first choice was to go back to school to get the master's degree. Comes with a 4-year service obligation upon completion of the degree, which still puts me around the 20-year mark of service for retirement wise. Not saying I'll get out at 20, 21 years, but that's where the service obligation will put me once I complete the 4-year ADSO for that. After that, I will potentially be competing for human resource jobs around the Army. I could go back into kind of an operational type of setting with what you see within your battalion, your brigade footprints, where you would have the chief HR office that served at the battalion and brigade levels. You know, I could serve in a capacity there and still be kind of in the operational community, serving the combat arms units. I could go to brick and mortar and work in hospitals as a chief, and then deputy chief of medical centers and hospitals, community hospitals. I could teach. I could go back to the AMED Center in school and look at being an instructor, a teacher. Human Resource Command in Fort Knox, Kentucky, offers a wide range of 70 Foxtrot human resource jobs to serve guidance counselors, career counselors. There's really no end to what I can do. Simultaneously, the 70 Foxtrot community meshes really well with the 70 Hotel, the planning, operations, security AOC specialization as well, to where I can kind of wear a dual hat if I wanted to, and be competitive to try to go into the operational community for those types of positions as well. if I wanted to. So there's really no ceiling on what you can do. It's your own imagination, creativity, and level of motivation, to be honest with you. I mean, it's like any type of Army environment you want to work in, basically there's going to be opportunities available. Geographically, 70 Foxtrots, human resources are everywhere you go on every military installation in the Army. So, I mean, it's really sky's the limit. And for me personally, being a little bit older than a lot of my peers, from the time frame that when I commissioned as an officer, you always got to be forward planning, backwards planning. So, obviously being in my 40s, I'm looking at what my retirement date may or may look like. So I also wanted an occupation and a skill set that's going to translate into the civilian workforce post-Army career. And the human resource does so beautifully. A lot of the acronyms, a lot of the type of work that you're doing day to day translates right over to the civilian workforce. And that's whether you're in a private healthcare facility or you're working for a military medical treatment facility. So I kind of, was looking at everything combined when I focused on the human resource piece. I didn't want to limit myself to just military service. I wanted something that was going to offer me continued life progression within the military community as well as post-military career. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Yes, sir. So focusing in on 70 Fox HR manager, how does that differ from, and excuse my ignorance, but from AG, right? Like they do human resources, but is your human resources specific to the medical field? So we're talking a lot of like privacy restrictions and those sort of considerations.
Yes, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, that's the biggest component that you kind of alluded to, is the fact that everything that I do human resource will be specifically for the medical community in some facet or another. Whereas the AG function, like you talked about, is going to be more on the operational side, and then you're going to find them throughout functioning through regular Army units and the competitive category side as opposed to straight medical. So like I'll be dealing with GS employees who are serving in the medical community, a lot of platforms and systems, human resource functions that are unique specifically to Army medicine.
Okay, I understand. So then 70 Fox, 70 Kilo are all 70 Kilo medical logistics. What you can say the same things about it in terms of transferability into the civilian sector, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very successful branch. The added advantage that a 70 Kilo has within the medical community is they're offered the opportunity to go to the Army's competitive category logistics course once they get ready to do their captain's career course, if they want to have that under their belt. So they have that opportunity to get that extra exposure to how the S4 function would play out, through your ordnance, your transportation, and your quartermaster. They're all comprised now. All three of those functions are comprised now under the competitive category for military logistics. Whereas the 70 Kilo medical officer does have that opportunity. They can apply to compete for one of those slots.
Okay, yes, sir. And then if somebody were to stay 70 Bravo, what are they doing as a major and as a lieutenant colonel?
Well, that's a good question, because I haven't met one. And if you were stayed as a 70 Bravo and you made it to lieutenant colonel, I don't know how you stayed in the Army. So I would like to meet that guy or gal, to be honest with you, because there's only so much you're going to do as a health service officer. At some point, those specializations, you've kind of would have outgrown your role, so to speak, rank wise and by position of authority and responsibility at that rank. Yeah, because the reality of the situation is by your 7th or 8th year of commissioned service, if you haven't pre-designated into an area of specialization, the Army is going to choose for you. And usually by default, those individuals end up as needs of the Army. So I'll throw that out there first. If the Army's short on a particular AOC, you could end up with that AOC, but predominantly a lot of them become 70 hotels, planning operations security officers. So like you can speak to with your experience, like how the S3 ran your planning cell within your infantry battalion, they would be doing that on a much larger scale, specializing in medical. So they would graduate from the platoon leader. Now they're working on division staff per se, as that lieutenant colonel.
Yes, sir. I wrote down all the 7 AOCs, and as I look at them again, it seems like you get a taste of every other, function or every other military function that we have outside of medical service, except for maybe intelligence. But I see comptroller, which is, money, finance. I see network administration, which is a little bit of, I guess, communication systems, logistics we spoke about, HR we spoke about, operations. So this is a chance, the way I'm looking at this for cadets, it's leaving the option open for you to get more technical and something else down the line, whether that's with money or with logistics or with networks. I mean, that's pretty cool. I had no idea. Again, my only exposure to medical service prior to this was thinking either the tactical side or hospital administration.
Right.
This is very informative.
And another thing is too, which, and I don't want to drown you with too much information and confuse people, but depending on which area of specialization you go into out of those 7, like I mentioned and briefly talked on what my career path looks like with applying for my long-term healthcare education and training as a 70 Foxtrot, trying to go back to school to get a master's degree in human resource management. Well, every single one of those specializations that you've written down have their own career paths to supporting education and professional development. So it's ultimately really sky's the limit. I mean, there's even other areas of specializations as a medical service officer, 70 Bravo, that you can apply for outside of those 7 AOCs, but are still standard or specific within the medical community, medical service community, such as 71 Foxtrot, I believe, which is psychological researcher. So you can learn and go get a PhD paid for by the Army to do psychological research and develop surveys and do all kinds of research studies at research institutes across the Army, that you have to be a medical service corps officer to apply for some of these specializations. So it's literally sky's the limit. It's the best way that I can explain it as far as pros and cons, but in this case specifically positive. When you're looking at your branch designation and you're struggling with which choice to make, when you become a captain as a medical service officer, everything within the Army opens up to you. Literally, it's endless opportunities, and it's sky's the limit. Like I said, you're only limited based off of your own imagination and creativity, because there's a job and a function that will suffice and support whatever that is as an individual. Whereas some of the other combat arms are more specialized, as you progress in rank, there's a fewer number of positions and opportunities. So therefore it becomes a lot more competitive to stay within that field. Case in point, you've probably known a number of infantry officers that are phenomenal officers and leaders that you served with as a platoon leader, and possibly your company commanders and XOs, that when it came time for them to do their captain's career course, they decided to branch transfer to a different branch, whether it be MI or something else. Well, these are individuals who have this forward planning at mind, and they want to make the Army a long-term career. So they're looking at other opportunities that are going to provide more opportunity for them as they progress in rank, because it's extremely competitive in a lot of these branches and fields. They're all phenomenal opportunities. but they're things for planning purposes for long-term retirement, career progression, and professional development that an individual has to keep in mind when they're doing this planning. Because, and once again, in my opinion, and it's just Captain Hill's opinion, there's not really another branch that really can compete with the Medical Service Corps as far as all the opportunities that are all inclusive within the medical service community.
No, I mean, I absolutely agree. And like, I'll be completely transparent. Like my job at FAMU is to promote combat arms, but like one downside of it, of the combat arms, of the infantry, the community that I formed a part of, is it is a canalizing, it is a funnel to where, the only way to go is, up in command to a certain degree, right? Like if you're not making the battalion command list, then what are you doing? If you're not successful battalion commander and you're not looking like you're going to be a successful brigade commander, then you're limited to the things that you can do. And it's not like you're branching out, you're serving on staffs. But yeah, whereas medical service is, I'm looking at it as like a tree, right? The base of the tree, the trunk of the tree is the 70 Bravo. And then from there, you hit a certain trigger point, and then you can just branch out to so many different directions. Yep.
Very good analogy. Yeah, I would agree with you.
So, sir, what are those other opportunities, say, for the students that want to be a physician's assistant down the line, or a physical therapist? What are those transfer opportunities that are only available to medical service officers?
There are going to be those opportunities. The biggest one that I can think of off the top of my head, and I don't have a lot of subject matter knowledge about this particular area, largely because I never had any interest in becoming a clinician. But PA is a big one. But the thing about becoming a PA, transitioning over from a medical service officer as a PA, is that you need to do it before you pin on the rank of captain, because the reason being is when you start the PA program, they're going to knock you back down to a first lieutenant. And then upon completion, you're going to get promoted back to captain. You're going to get the rank back. But there were a lot of friends that I've had and associates, peers that I've met over the course of my career that put in PA packets, and that was the case. They had already made the list for promotion to captain, and they had to make the hard decision as to whether or not they wanted to remain a first lieutenant for another 18 months or 20 months, whatever the case may be, before they would be eligible to pin captain on. Once you pin captain and you progress on, you've kind of missed that window of opportunity. Most of those individuals apply for the IPAT program, which is at Baylor, located at Fort Sam Houston, Texas. Anybody can actually apply for that particular program. It's not necessarily unique to the medical service community, but it is unique in the sense that as a medical service officer, if you don't do it before that timeline in your career progression, it's just not going to be afforded to you as an opportunity anymore. As far as going to medical school or doing anything like that, you just have to look at the yearly long-term healthcare education and training NILPER messages when HRC releases those, to see what's going to be available and what branches they're going to open those opportunities up. I've seen over the course of my career to where, say physical therapy school, if somebody had the right scores and had met all the prerequisites to apply for those programs, they could submit an application packet, and a panel would meet and assess them and vote on it. And if they got selected, then they could leave the medical service community and entail that. Obviously, all these things come with longer service obligations and ADSOs if you want to go back to the schoolhouse and be given career development and educational opportunities at no expense other than your time and your commitment. Then obviously it's going to come with a longer service obligation. But those change annually, and it's all needs of the Army. So I'm not going to sit here and say that there might not be an opportunity for a med service officer to apply to go to medical school, because that could change yearly based on the medical corps' need for doctors. You just never know. you just never know what the case is. But there are those unique opportunities. Like I said, the one that I can speak to wholeheartedly and I know the more about is the PA, the physician assistance program. But like I said, it comes with that time period. Another thing that's interesting is there's certain nurses that actually who decide whatever reason they don't want to practice medicine as clinicians, as nurses, they can elect to potentially come over and become medical service officers as well at some point in their career as well. I don't know the intricacies of how that works, but it's just unique to the medical service community.
Well, yes, sir. But even though like it's still worthwhile hearing you say that, because I can attest to it as an infantry officer in the operations side of the Army, like we're not getting those calls of, hey, apply to medical school. No, like we're getting what everybody else gets in terms of the FLEP, like the legal education program, maybe some Browning opportunities later on down the line as a major or a senior captain to, you know, be a congressional aide or State Department aide. But these medical pipelines to transfer over to be in the medical community do not exist for us. Like Captain Hale mentioned, the only one available to us is the IPAT program. So if you're at all interested in leaving that option open, then medical service branch is where you want to be. And then notwithstanding all of the other 7 AOCs that you mentioned, sir, that gives you a lot of options to specialize. So sir, I think we've had a very, very fruitful conversation. I've learned a lot. It's, you know, it's helping me be a better instructor because now I can have a more informed conversation with my cadets who are interested in medical service. I encourage anybody to, if you're curious about it, keep asking. Captain Hale is assigned to a recruiting, medical recruiting company or detachment. There's medical recruiting detachments across the nation. You just got to Google it. U.S. Army Recruiting Medical, and they're specific to the Army Medical Department. So it's not like regular recruiters, and they have information and knowledge specific to that domain. So sir, I want to thank you. Again, you've contributed to not only my cadets education, but anybody who logs on to the Leaders in the Force YouTube channel 3 years from now and listens to this. So I appreciate it, sir. I'll cede the floor to you for final comments.
Once again, you know, like I said, this is just a phenomenal opportunity. As a commander, I reached out to a variety of ROTC programs in Hawaii, predominantly the University of Hawaii, and I was able to go in and talk to a lot of their cadets. I've done, you know, presentations and other ROTC programs across the state of Florida since I've been in recruiting command. And to be honest with you, this is the most rewarding thing you can do as an officer is give back for a couple different reasons. One, I'm sure you've heard yourself and the cadets as they progress in their careers and commission and go on active duty and then the reserve units and serve in whatever capacity they're serving in. But you're always looking for your replacement. And I know personally, with the relationships that you build over the course of your career, you build very strong relationships with the people that you serve and you care about them, you become family. So there's really no better way to give back than to train the people that are going to be replacing you to ensure that that continuity of care, it never breaks. It's ebbs and it flows perfectly, and you can look back and be proud that you took time out of your day to develop and mentor individuals to keep the force strong and continuing. And it's just a pleasure to be able to offer that. So thank you for reaching out to me and giving me this opportunity to speak.
Absolutely, sir. I think that's one of the 5 tenets of our profession: stewardship of the profession, looking out and then pulling people forward to set them up for success. And yeah, we appreciate it definitely, especially in my program. We have a lot of interest in medical service, and unfortunately, it's not a highly advertised, transparent community, not for any fault of the members of the community. It's just, there's a lot of intricacies, and it's not what is normally advertised. At my commissioning source, it wasn't. So thank you, sir.
No problem. Anytime, and feel free to pass my information along to anybody who would like to have more personalized conversations, get more information. I'll be more than happy to assist in any way I can.
Yes, sir. Okay, so thank you everybody once again for tuning into another episode of Leaders in the Force. I encourage you to share this if you found it informative. Share this with your fellow cadets. Share it on your social media. It's for everybody's benefit. Thank you, and see you next time.